My husband didn't hear me come through the front door that Thursday night. I had left work early because of the migraine pressing behind my left eye, and the garage door had been broken for 2 weeks, which meant I'd parked on the street and walked around through the side gate, something I almost never did. He was in the kitchen. I could hear him before I could see him. "The deed transfer is already done," he was saying, voice low but confident. "She doesn't know and she won't find out. I used her notarized signature from the refinancing documents, same paper stock, same ink. Nobody's going to look twice at it." I stopped in the hallway, my keys were still in my hand. "The house goes to you, and once you flip it, the first $80,000 comes to me. That's the deal." A pause. Then his voice dropped even lower. "She's not going to find out, man. She trusts me completely. That's the whole point." I pressed my back against the wall of my own hallway and stood there, not breathing. My father had died 11 months ago. He'd left me the house he'd owned outright for 30 years, a 4-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood that had tripled in value since he bought it. Paid off, no mortgage, no liens, just mine. And apparently not anymore. I did not walk into that kitchen, I did not confront my husband, I did not cry. What I did was pull out my phone, open the voice memo app, and start recording. "My name is Zara. I am 31 years old. I am a cybersecurity analyst at one of the largest insurance companies in Charlotte, North Carolina. My job is to find things people try to hide in digital spaces: fraudulent claims, falsified records, manipulated timestamps. I spend my days tracing electronic footprints that people believe they've erased." I met my husband at a friend's birthday party 6 years ago. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. Good-looking, funny, always the person in the room who made you feel like you were the only one he was talking to. He ran a mid-size residential construction and renovation company he'd built from nothing after college, and he was proud of it in a way that seemed genuinely attractive back then. He looked like someone who knew what he wanted and worked hard to get it. What I didn't know and wouldn't find out until I started digging was that the company had been underwater for almost 2 years. We had been married for 3 years when my father died. Pancreatic cancer, he was 62. We had 7 weeks between the diagnosis and the funeral, and those 7 weeks still live in my body in a way I can't fully describe. My father was my person, who had rebuilt that craftsman house with his own hands over 30 years, room by room, on the weekends, with patience I have never seen in anyone else. He left me the house outright with a handwritten note tucked inside the will that said, "Keep it or sell it, baby. Either way, it's your foundation now." My husband had stood beside me at the graveside and held my hand. He had cried, or appeared to. That was 11 months before the phone call I was not supposed to hear. I stood in that hallway for 4 full minutes, recording everything. When I heard my husband set his phone down on the counter, I turned and walked back out the same way I'd come in. I sat in my car on the street in front of my own house for a long time. The streetlights were on. A neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. The emotional part of me wanted to go back in there and tear the room apart. The professional part of me calculated what I actually needed versus what I wanted. Before I go any further, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you have ever had to fight to protect something that was yours from the people who were supposed to be in your corner, hit like and subscribe. You are not alone. The first thing I did that night was not confront my husband, it was research. I went back inside through the front door 20 minutes after I'd left, told him I'd just gotten home, said the migraine had finally broken. He kissed my cheek. He asked if I wanted him to reheat dinner. I said yes and watched him at the stove while my mind ran numbers. After dinner, after he fell asleep, I went into his office. What I found in the first 20 minutes rewrote everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The construction company's financial statements were a masterpiece of creative accounting, revenue inflated by fake invoices, subcontractor costs buried under dummy expense categories. To a casual reader, the business looked profitable. To someone who knew what she was looking for, it was a house of cards 17 months into its collapse. He had borrowed $340,000 from a private hard money lender 8 months prior, using construction equipment as collateral. Equipment he had since sold. He owed the full principal plus weekly compounding interest, and the final payment deadline was December 31st, 11 weeks away. The lender had his personal cell number. I kept scrolling. The deed transfer document was in a folder labeled MISC, the kind of label you use when you want something to disappear into the digital noise. It was a scanned copy, and it had my signature at the bottom. I know what my signature looks like. I know its particular slope, the way I never fully closed the loop on my lowercase a. This signature closed the loop. It was close. Close enough to pass a county records clerk moving through hundreds of filings in a day, but it was not mine. My father's house had been transferred to my brother-in-law's name 3 weeks ago. I sat with that for a moment. Then I plugged in the encrypted USB drive I kept in my work bag and started copying files. My brother-in-law's business model was straightforward: buy distressed properties at a discount, renovate fast, sell at market. He and my sister-in-law lived well in a nice subdivision outside of Gastonia. The kind of lifestyle that requires constant cash flow, which means the margin between what came in and what went out was always uncomfortably thin. My father's house was worth $620,000 in the current market, in a neighborhood where the average home sold in 9 days. The math was simple. My brother-in-law would flip the house for a fast $550,000 net, hand my husband $80,000 as agreed, and walk away with nearly $500,000 that was, in the eyes of a forged legal document, entirely his to keep, and I would be left holding nothing but grief and whatever story my husband had prepared to explain it. I spent 2 full weeks building the case before I moved a single visible piece on the board. I submitted a deed history request to the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds. The confirmation came back, the transfer was recorded, my signature, a notary stamp I did not recognize, dated 3 weeks prior. I photographed every page and sent copies to my personal cloud and a thumb drive I kept at my office. Then I ran a recovery scan on my husband's deleted emails using a forensic tool I use professionally. People genuinely believed a deleted means gone. It does not. It moves. I found 14 emails between my husband and my brother-in-law going 7 months, planning this in the kind of operational detail that would make a federal prosecutor's career. The timestamps, the notary contact, the listing strategy, the wire instructions for the $80,000 payment. There was even an email debating whether to list at $595,000 or $575,000 to move it faster. A negotiation over the price of my father's life's work, conducted over a Thursday afternoon in my husband's home office, 3 feet from a framed photo of our wedding. The notary turned out to be my brother-in-law's college roommate, still licensed, still in practice, apparently comfortable with felonies. I hired a private investigator, a former federal agent named Felix who I'd worked with professionally on a corporate fraud case years before. I called him from my office with the door closed. Deed fraud, he said before I finished explaining. Force, and if they used email, federal wire fraud. They used email, I said, extensively. How solid is the package? Solid enough to lock up 3 people. He told me he'd have surveillance on the Gastonia property within 48 hours. I sent him the address. My mother-in-law arrived on a Wednesday. She pulled into the driveway in her champagne Cadillac with 2 rolling suitcases and a foil-covered casserole dish, announcing that she was worried about me, that she wanted to be there for family, that the holidays were coming and she didn't want to be rattling around her empty house alone. My husband looked surprised to see her, which meant either he hadn't called her himself or he was a better actor than I'd ever given him credit for. I filed the uncertainty and smiled. My mother-in-law had never been openly cruel to me. It was more refined than that, the particular social talent of making you feel peripheral in your own life without ever saying anything that could be cleanly quoted later. She addressed major household decisions to my husband as though I were a charming visiting guest. She asked about my work with the specific brand of polite disinterest that communicated it didn't count as a real concern. In 3 years of marriage, she had made an art form of the almost compliment. She moved into the guest room adjacent to the master bedroom. That first dinner, she steered the conversation to real estate, casually, mentioned her other son's recent success with property investments, said the market was really moving in certain parts of the metro, said someone she knew had done extremely well just by knowing when to sell. I kept my face open and pleasant. My husband was cutting his chicken with slightly too much focus. That's interesting, I said. What neighborhood? She named a zip code 15 minutes from my father's house. I love that area, I said. Incredible craftsman stock over there. Some of those houses have been in the same family for 30 years. Real bones. Smiled at her. My dad's old place is over that way, actually. I keep meaning to get over and check on it. A flicker crossed her face. My husband's knife paused for half a second. You should, she said evenly. You really should take care of it. I'll go this weekend, I said. She picked up her fork. Of course. She intercepted me the next morning before I left for work. She was already dressed, sitting at the kitchen island with 2 cups of coffee ready, in the practiced way of someone who had rehearsed the staging. I wanted to talk to you, she said, about the house, your father's house. I sat down across from her. Grief is complicated, she said, and sometimes holding on to physical things, a property, an old house, it keeps us attached to the pain. It prevents healing. She folded her hands in a gesture of compassionate concern that she had clearly used before. If you ever consider selling, sooner could actually be better than later. Markets are unpredictable, and your brother-in-law, he's been so successful at navigating these things. He could help you through the whole process. Take some of the burden off. The audacity of sitting across the kitchen island from me and pitching me on voluntarily surrendering the thing they had already stolen was genuinely impressive. That's really thoughtful, I said. I'll think about it. She smiled and reached for her coffee. I did not go to my father's house that weekend. I went to meet with my attorney and with the detective from the Mecklenburg County Economic Crimes Unit who had been assigned the case based on the evidence package I had submitted 48 hours earlier. The package I gave law enforcement contained the recorded deed transfer with my forged signature alongside 6 samples of my actual notarized signature pulled from documented filings over 4 years. The differences were visible to the naked eye. 14 recovered emails with full metadata, including IP addresses traced back to my husband's home office router. A forensic analysis I'd prepared documenting a timestamp discrepancy. The deed was filed at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The notary's digital certification seal showed usage at 2:51 p.m. the same day. My husband had claimed to be at a job site in Concord that afternoon. GPS data from his company fleet app, which I had administrative access to as a signatory on the company insurance policy, showed his truck parked 2 miles from the notary's office until 3:15 p.m. Bank records showing the $80,000 wire from my brother-in-law's LLC to a personal checking account in my husband's name that I had not known existed, sent 4 days after the deed was recorded. And the audio recording from my hallway. The economic crimes detective listened to the recording 3 times. Then she looked at me across the table and said, "How long did it take you to put all this together?" 2 weeks, I said. She shook her head. What do you do for work again? I told her. She almost smiled. Okay, she said, here's what happens next. My mother-in-law had been in our house for 9 days when my husband came home early from a meeting and found me at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Working from home, he asked, setting his keys on the counter. Just a project, I said. He leaned over my shoulder, too casual, the body language of someone trying to read without appearing to read. I had a routine quarterly report open on screen, nothing that would alarm him. But I had left my phone face up on the counter with my attorney's contact thread visible. I watched him see it. I watched him choose not to mention it. That night, Felix's audio device picked up a conversation in the living room. I listened to it in my car the next morning, parked in my office garage. She had her lawyer's name on her phone, my husband said. Right there, she wasn't hiding it. A pause. Or she wanted you to see it, my mother-in-law said. You think she knows? I think you need to call your brother and tell him to list the property immediately. A quick sale at a slight discount is better than losing everything. Her voice was calm and exactly as cold as I'd always sensed. It was underneath the casseroles and the long pauses. A panicked husband is more dangerous to this than anything she might know. What if she? Let me worry about her, she said. You focus on the sale. I sat in the parking garage for a long time, not crying, something past crying. The specific grief of understanding that a person you loved had been doing a cost-benefit analysis on you since before the wedding. I forwarded the recording to my attorney before I went inside. The morning everything ended, I had been awake since 4. My brother-in-law had listed my father's house the previous evening. Felix sent me the alert at 9:47 p.m., $575,000. Marketed as a renovated craftsman with original character. The listing photos included exterior shots taken with a wide-angle lens on a clear day. I recognized the angle. I had taken almost the same photo on my phone the last Sunday afternoon I spent with my father, 3 months before he died. They had moved the timeline up because they were afraid, and afraid people move too fast. At 7:15 that morning, two detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit and one agent from the Charlotte FBI field office knocked on my brother-in-law's front door in Gastonia. At 7:22, two detectives and a patrol unit arrived at mine. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when my husband came downstairs and saw the badges. His face did something I don't have a precise word for, a sequential collapse, as if every version of himself he had ever constructed fell away in layers and left just this pale, frightened man in his socks at the bottom of the stairs. "Nolan Watts," the detective said. My husband nodded. He did not look at me once. They read him his rights in my kitchen. My mother-in-law had come downstairs in her bathrobe and stood against the refrigerator with her arms crossed, watching with the expression of someone running a damage calculation and finding the numbers catastrophic. When the second officer moved toward her, conspiracy charges, based on the recorded conversation and documented communications, she found her voice. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, looking straight at me for the first time all morning. "You would really do this to your own family over a house?" I looked at her and didn't raise my voice. "It isn't about the house," I said. "It's about what all of you decided my signature was worth." She had nothing to say to that. They walked her out behind my husband. I stood in my doorway and watched the patrol car pull away from the curb on a clear November morning. My sister-in-law was arrested in Gastonia an hour later. She had known. The night the listing went live, she had called my brother-in-law to congratulate him. That call was in the record. She was named in the conspiracy charges. The listing came down by 9 a.m., flagged by the county registrar's office as part of an active fraud investigation. Within 2 weeks, the deed transfer was legally invalidated. The county recorder voided the fraudulent filing and restored my father's property to my name. Recorded, official, done. Felix sent me a message that said simply, "Clean sweep." My brother-in-law accepted a plea that included 30 months in federal prison and full restitution. The notary surrendered his license and pled guilty to fraud as a cooperating witness. My mother-in-law's case went to trial. She maintained to the end that she had merely been offering her grieving daughter-in-law some practical perspective on real estate. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. My husband, I filed for divorce the week charges were filed, took his plea agreement and avoided the worst of the sentencing guidelines. He still faces 18 months suspended with federal probation, 2 years of check-ins and travel restrictions. The construction company is gone. The equipment was already sold. There is nothing left of the life he built, because what he built it on was debt and performance, and the assumption that the people who loved him would never look closely enough to see through it. I tried to feel sorry for him, in the brief way you try to feel what you think you're supposed to feel. It didn't work. I kept the house. I spent a weekend there in late November, first genuinely cold weekend of the year, going through the last of my father's things in the garage. I found his original toolbox, the one he'd had since before I was born, with his initials scratched into the handle in his careful block print. I found a coffee can full of hardware he'd saved from every room he'd ever renovated, just in case something ever needed fixing again. I found a scrap of receipt paper tacked inside the kitchen junk drawer, with 4 words on it in his handwriting: "Measure twice, cut once." He said that to me my entire childhood, about lumber, about decisions, about people. I applied it in the end to the most important case of my life. I rent the house now to a young couple who are slowly restoring the front porch on weekends, which I think my father would have liked. I live in a clean apartment in South End on my own salary. I go to work and I trace the footprints that people believe they've permanently erased, and I am very good at it. People ask me sometimes why I didn't confront my husband the night I came through the side gate and heard that call, why I didn't scream or demand answers or fall apart. Because panic is a liability. Because the truth doesn't need your emotion, it just needs your attention and your time. My father taught me that. He taught me that nothing worth keeping is built by cutting corners, and that a house built on shortcuts does not stand. He was right about that. He was right about almost everything. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to protect something that was yours from the people who were supposed to protect it alongside you, leave a comment. I want to hear your story. Like and subscribe if you believe that patience, preparation, and the truth are always the most powerful things in the room. Thank you for being here.